Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Chaf Aleph. Begin on the top line of the Amud, where the Gemara continues the discussion for the previous Daf of this idea of Zenene v'Zelei Chaser. If a person is having benefit, someone's squatting in someone's property without his awareness, would that person be chayiv to pay, or would he not? Ashis corresponds because of Chesed turn to Daf Chaim. During today's Daf should be discussed by Bnei Yisrael and Yisrael throughout the entire world. Something to discuss in today's daf are hadab b'chatzach haverish. Let me die to this is the case. If you're dwelling in your friend's courtyard without his awareness, this is Zenan, he's having benefit. Zelechasa, and he's not losing it because he has no awareness. It's nothing, no skin off his back. Would you have to pay or not? The concept of Meshalemis Meshanenis, we learned in the Mishnah that there are certain things that you're not going to pay for what the damage was, but you're going to have to pay what your benefit was for that. Now, when a person makes a pit in his own domain and then he's mafkir the area, would that be a liability of bar or not? The halacha of if your initial act was a negligence, at the end it ends up being that that's not what caused the damage. It was anyways beyond your control. How do we qualify that? Do we hold you liable because you start off with negligence, or would you say you're patur because at the end it ended up being annoyance? To begin the current daf, the Gemara earlier debated this question. Do you have to pay rent or not? So the Gemara explained that this is a case of avulameger v'lekaimal agra. The guy himself would generally have to pay rent. He doesn't have anywhere else to stay. But the owner doesn't usually rent out the place. So this is what's called zenen v'zelechase, because since not ordinarily rented, he's not losing anything. But this guy's having benefit. The question is, do you have to say tzarich l'asal schar? He has to give him the rent because his hanis l'maisi had benefit, or in tzarich l'asal because mechasarticha? What did I cause you for that loss? So on that the Gemara continues, as the Gemara continues top of Chav Aleph and Aleph, we had brought two different versions in Rabbi Yechanan, if yes or not. Now the Gemara brings Shalach le Reb Abba bar Zavda l'Mori bar Mar. He sent him to ask from Rav Huna this question. If someone dwells in his friend's courtyard without his awareness, does he have to pay him for the living there or not? Now, in the meantime, while he was coming there to ask him the question, Rav Huna passed away, so he wasn't able to ask him the question. So Rabba bar Rav Huna, but the son of Rav Huna, Rabba, he said, "I'll tell you two halachas from my father." This is what my father, my teacher, said in the name of Rav. First of all, answering your question, that he does not have to pay him for having lived in his apartment because, what did I cause you loss? You anyways had no awareness. You anyways don't rent out your apartment, and therefore I don't have to pay you. And another thing my father taught me was the following halacha. If someone rents a house from Ruvain, and it turns out it's not Reuven's house, it's a scam. It was actually Shimon's house. And he was paying rent to Reuven. So Allah is malasach Shimon. So he's got to pay the rent to Shimon. So the Gemara says, well, Shimon ma'avidite. What does Shimon have to do when you're renting a house from Reuven? So the Gemara explains what we just said from Rashi. What we're saying is, Nimtza by Shimon, if it really turns out that it's not Reuven's house, he was listing, I have an apartment to rent, and this guy knows that the owner Shimon is out in who knows where for the whole winter, and he's renting out this guy's house. Mala le'sacher, you got to give the wages to Shimon. So the Gemara says, wait a second, Tarti? In other words, you're saying two teachings that contradict each other, because this that you're going to pay the wage, this that you were renting the house of Shimon from Reuven, is the case of living in Chatzah Shimon Shaloi Midas Shimon. And you're saying that you got to pay him the rent? But the first halacha said this exact halacha. So the second halacha directly contradicts the first halacha. It's living in someone else's apartment without you. Someone else was showing as if it was his apartment, and you don't have to pay him because it's not really his. So you got to give the other person who's the real owner. But you live in b'chatzah chavera shlemedaita, and you said in it's right, so that's what the Gemara is going to answer. But the Gemara is assuming that it's the same case, where the guy doesn't know about it. The guy is not busy renting it out. So it sounds like it's the same halacha. And that the Gemara answers like you're saying, well, it depends. The second halacha is the kaim la'agra, that Shimon usually rents it out when he could, for weekends or whatever, and then you got to give the rent money to Shimon because that's zen and v'zechaser. This is a loss because he does rent it out. The first halacha is the kaim la'agra, that's not usually rented out, and therefore since it's also shalom midas, in contrast to what we said previously at the end of the previous daf of hektish, where that's always considered midas, here it's A, he doesn't usually rent it out, and it's shalom midas, so therefore, that's why you're not going to have to pay the money to the owner. It manami, so we learned. Some say huna. If someone lives in his friend's courtyard without his awareness, in a does not have to go ahead and give him the rent money because it didn't cause him a loss. But someone rents a house from the city members, you're gonna have to pay the wages to you have to give the rent money to the owners. So the no, that's just it. The Gemara says itmanami. This is teaching the same thing. We just have that we show this illustrated again. And but the second halacha said if you rent the house from the city members, you have to give the rent money to the owners. So the Gemara might to tell you what are the owners doing over here. So the Gemara says what the Bryce is teaching, the Amar is teaching like this. If you find who the real owners are, so you have to give them the rent. So the Gemara says Tarti. The Gemara is asking the same question. This version has the same question in it. Like, what do you mean? I thought this is considered hadar b'chatz chaber shlo medaitoi. You rented it from the city members, and it turns out it was really certain owners. So Gemara says no. The same answer. Bava Kama Daf. The second halacha is when it's meant for rent, and therefore zen and chaser. The first teaching was when it's not meant for rent, and therefore that's and then it was chaser that you don't have to pay for that hana. He says, if someone lives in his friend's courtyard, which is not meant for rent, without his awareness, which halacha we've been saying, you don't have to give the rent money, but the Gemara gives a reasoning. It says a pasuk in Yeshaya, Ushiya, and desolation, yukas sha'ar, will destroy the gate. Meaning, either two interpretations. Either means that there's a shin dalad that his name is She'iyah, which destroys the gate of a house where people are not living. So therefore, if you have someone actually squatting in your apartment, he's actually giving you benefit. So that's why when it's lekaim agra and someone's having an he doesn't have to pay because he's actually giving a benefit. Or another interpretation is a house that's desolate and it's without any people, yukashar, that the mazikin are going to crush that house. So again, there's the owner is actually benefiting from his use. So therefore, that's why he's not going to have to pay anything for squatting in your apartment. Or Omar Abashi says, he says, I actually saw this shindalad, this demon. It gores like a ox, meaning it smashes. If you're not there, you come back, suddenly it looks like it's in shambles. What happened? Because it becomes overgrown, and these are all the demonic forces in the world. Rav Yosef Amei says slightly different. He says, Beisa meyasva, he says a house that's dwelled with people, Yasev remains settled. Because the ones who are living inside, they see what it needs, and they fix it. There's certain odds and ends or whatever, this and that, and before, that it doesn't just fall apart. So therefore, again, when the guy's squatting in your place, he's benefiting you because he's taking care of the basic things. Says what's the between these two interpretations? It sounds like the same thing. Someone's there, it's good. Someone's not there, it's not good. The difference is the komeshtamish bay. If let's say the homeowner uses that shed, let's say betzivi v'tivni, where he keeps his wood and his straw over there, and then you have a squatter who goes and starts living in your shed. So there's no she'iyah, there's no desolation because it is utilized, but the reasoning of Beisa Meyasva you would have, because you're not settled in over there. The guy who's squatting over there suddenly starts fixing the lights in your shed, and he starts, making sure the handle is tight because this became his new house that he started squatting in. So that would be the difference between those two different interpretations. If they would be considered having hana from him to say that it's that he shouldn't have to pay for squatting in your shed. So the Gemara brings a story. Gavra. There's a certain person, the Bana Padna. He built a mansion, a Kilkolta Diasmi, on the garbage dump of orphans. So interesting. I guess they owned a certain property, which was a garbage dump, and some wealthy guy he got zoning for this, and he took his landfill, this area that cannot be built on, and he suddenly built his mansion over there. So Agvid of Nachman Lapadna Menes, Rav Nachman went and collected this guy's mansion from him for having stolen the land of these orphans. Says the Gemara, shall we say Rav Nachman holds, if someone lives in this friend's courtyard without his awareness, I mean, this was property that was not being utilized. This was used for a landfill. And this guy's using it without their awareness, that you have to go ahead and pay the rent money. Then you see that's why he's collecting his mention from him. Says the Gemara, no, it's not exactly, because either it's Lashon Karma, it's a type of a nation, maybe these indigenous tribes, I don't know, that live on these wild lands, or Kadmonoi, there were certain Kadmonim that lived over there. But be that as it may, there were these people that used to live over there, that they gave the orphans just a little token of for having allowed them for living over there. And so therefore, like Rashi explained, it is Kaimala Agra. In other words, it is considered Zenene V'Zechaser. And therefore you have to pay, even though he's not really losing so much. Like we said, like when the guy is a brand new apartment and like someone's living over there, that is considered Zechaser, because Shacharusa Dashyasa, like the walls start getting black, like this is references, you know. Yeah, but it's Zenene V'Zechaser. Not doing it. Is that okay? But I'm saying we said yesterday after the shir that not necessarily is it okay, but for hezek, for payment. No, but it's not. But after 3 years they'll have a chazuk and will say I give him too. And if you meicha, it's not. So I have to be meicha, and the bell lays on me, and then he keeps it. But there's one thing: if he slept there and he went away, and we want to know the room was empty, do you have to pay? But he's doing a maise and he's staying there. He's not moving away. Was there one night and just went into his property? In any property, of course, somebody comes in, he goes into the other one. Hey, you're not doing anything with it. I'm walking here. Is that okay? I mean, just not. Maybe it's not okay, but what are we making him pay? Maybe we'll say you have to get. For the property. What does the property for? It wasn't being used. So it's for landfill. Used, but it's value real estate. I'm holding it. Maybe I hear. You have to know, is that a grumma? You have to know what. I don't think he made them remove the house, but he paid for the piece of property. Let's assume how much is property and give him whatever he needs to. It sounds like he wanted him to collect the rent money. I mean, he's like rent. He's like you. It's either you pay the property, you pay the rent, but it's a piece of property. Make the guy pay for the property. Right, he wants him to pay the rent money. It sounds like, but right. So I'm saying. So that's I'm saying. The loss. The Gemara's understanding is only if it had rent value, which the Gemara says. Yeah, there was this Karmanoi people that used to pay something, so therefore it is considered zechas. If not, it's lechaser. You this is a landfill. It doesn't make a difference to you. So what am I paying? I'm not causing any loss to you. So that seems to be I mean, you're asking good questions. The question is how do we monetize that? You know, say it all comes down to monetizing. No, these were orphans, and therefore it's like we're right. Doesn't know exactly. Right, that is the fundamental question regarding Zenan was a lechaser. Are we? Is your benefiting requiring you to pay, or does it have to be that there's a loss that the owner has that what? Right, no. If it's kaimala agra.
But if he would know,
if he would, yeah.
That's why we came up with no trespassing.
Simple. You always come up with simple answers. So put a no trespassing sign.
There's an element that doesn't bother.
Right. The question is bothering. What does that mean? Right. Exactly. But even if it bothers, is that can you monetize that? What is that? You know what I'm saying? If it's chassid, if it's rent, if I would have had rent, I lost out on the rent. So that's what I have. It has this value. But if not, what value are you giving it? So Amalei. So Rav Nachman said to him that Zil Paisin Ole asked me. Go appease the orphans. Go pay them something that'll make them happy for using their property. He didn't pay attention. So Rav Nachman actually took away the guy's mansion as collections for his unwillingness to pay for the rental of the orphan's properties. Now the Gemara goes back. So again, we saw that was the halacha. We came out that according to many, Zenan was a leichaser. You're going to be potter if it's leikaim agra, which is leichaser. So the Mishnah had said that there are certain cases. So we said, okay, what does it mean it pays when it has benefit? Meaning it doesn't pay mashazika. So he said at b'chulu etc. Because there's two cases that we're really going on. We're really going in the second half. It said if it eats from the street, because in the Rosh Hashanah itself, you only pay for its benefit because it's really Shein Rosh Hashanah, we're really potter. But Chamu Masakin that okay, you're having benefit, we're going to obligate you to pay for that. Now then the Mishnah went on to say, and this is really what our Gemara is going on. Mitzidei Rechava, it's from the sides of the Rosh Hashanah, Mishalem has to pay. It is liable for the damages. So that's going to be the Gemara's discussion to know how do you qualify this halacha. What is on the tzidei harechava that is telling us that you're going to be chayiv to pay for? So the Gemara explains. Amarav, he says, ubimachazeres. We're talking about where the animal turned its head from the street to the sides of the street, and it ate peiros. That's where the Mishnah says mishalemes mashahazeka has to pay what it damaged, even though the whole animal is in the street. So, in such a case, you're going to be chayiv. Now, what's the reasoning for this? So, there's different interpretation that Taisus brings. He explains that Rashi says we're talking about dafka when it turns its head. Because if it ate without turning its head, for example, let's say the sides of the street stick out, and he ate from where it sticks out, then it would be shein b'shas harabim. Then it would be you would only pay what hana you would have. Another interpretation from Rashi brings is that the reason why you're chayiv by mechazez when it turns its head is actually because of keren, because it's meshuna for it to turn its head. So that's Taisus' question. No one said it's not half. It just said Melech Shalom is mashazeka. You're going to pay what the damage is, but you'll pay half. Taisus says Mishlam is mashazeka sounds like it's nezik shalom. That is Taisus' question, but it's not mashanenes. It's mashazek. It would be chatzi nezik, but or Taisus brings from the Ri that the tzidei rechava. The reason why Yechayiv is because it's considered chatzar hanizik, because everyone has permission to put his peiros by the entryway of his house on the sides of the street. And according to Rav, it's even in a place that it could eat with turning its head. His chiddush is that it's still considered chatzar hanizik, and you be chayiv nezik shalom because of shein. So there's different ways how to understand what exactly Rav is saying, but simply put, he holds that even b'mechazer is chayiv if it remained in the Rishus Rab and he merely turned his head and ate from the side. It's considered shein b'shus hanizik because people keep produce this since animals usually don't turn to the side. So therefore, that's the halacha that we're saying by tzidei rechava that you'd be chayiv for mashazeka is when it turns its head from the street and eats what's on the side of the street. Okay, that's Rab. Shmuel says, afila mechazer is nami pater. So even when it turns its head, the animal's still going to be pater because since the animal itself is in the street, so it's normal for it to turn its head. So therefore, it's shein b'reshus harabim. As Taisa explains, where if it's in a place where it could eat by turning its head, so that's considered as reshus harabim. The question then becomes, our Mishnah said explicitly, tzidei rechava is mishlemes mashazika. So according to Shmuel, if you putter when you turn your head from the street, so what is the case of tzidei rechava that you can be chayiv mashazika? Says the Gemara, it's good to shavkas l'rechava. It's when the animal leaves the street. The Bava Kama Daf and it goes and stands there on the side of the street, where it's not the norm for oxen to go there. So therefore, that's not going to be considered as reshus harabim. That's going to be the case according to Shmuel that you can be chayiv at tzidei rechava. That's machlekes regarding machazeres, or only if it goes there. Now, those who teach this teaching independently, meaning it was not qualifying the halacha of the Mishnah. It was just machazeres. Regarding when the animal turns its head and eats what's on the side of the streets, Rav says, yes, you're going to be liable because it's shein b'shus hanizik. Shmuel says, no, you're going to be pater. On that, the question then becomes, so then according to him, they weren't talking about the Mishnah, but then the Gemara was asking from them on the Mishnah. According to Shmuel, so what is the case that you can be chayv for what you damage on the sides of the street if you're saying that you're pater? That the answer was, if it left the street, it stands on the side of the street, that's the case where, according to Shmuel, you're going to be chayv. So it's a machlekes in the Mishnah, a machlekes how qualified the law of the Mishnah of tzidir chavet yichayv is that even when you're in the street and you turn your head to eat from the side of the street, that's only when you go, the entire animal goes to the side of the street and eats over there. Now, Master Menachem Yitzchak, he asks on Rav from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had another case after this. It spoke about if the animal eats me pesach hachanos from the opening of the store, the shalemis mashanenes. The owner of the ox has to pay whatever benefit he had from his ox having eaten. So the question is, heichem mishkachasla. So wait a second. What's this case? So it says the Gemara, pshita b'mechazeres. Obviously, it's talking about where the animal turns its head because the opening of the store is not inside the street, and therefore you could only have that the animal's eating from the opening of the store if it turns its head to eat from the...
A normal store has a responsibility to be somewhat protected. Or are you talking about a stall? Although it's it seems to be a walled store versus a stall like, a vegetable market day.
Okay.
The socher has to maintain some type of decorum as far as protecting merchandise.
And at the same time, you could say the owner of the animal, he has responsibility to protect his animal. The animals could go into the street. So if something's in the street itself, that's orche, that's shemesh hasaram, that you potter. But to eat off someone else's back or to eat from the opening of a store.
I understand, but
You have to understand the standard of life of those days.
Right.
With animals
Right. Right.
So, but that was the Matthias, that the owner of the animal knew that he had an animal.
Right.
Note the word Gemara is using usually is connotating some type of a protected stall.
Usually is similar to today's store. Not like you walk to the
Yeah, so you have to know exactly who's responsibility, but the Gemara understands that generally the animal is the one that has to be watched. And v'kamar. So what is the Mishnah saying? You have to pay mashanenes. Wait a second, mashanenes in sounds like you have to pay only what your benefit was, mashazikuloi, but what it damaged not. Well, that's not like Rav. Rav had said that the halacha of our Mishnah b'tzidir rechav that you have to pay mashazika, not just mashanenes, was when the animal's in the street and it turns its head. So why is it any different than when it turns its head to eat from the opening of the store? That they were saying you only pay mashanenes, not mashazika. Says the Gemara, who Rav Nachman Yitzchak, who asked the question, he gave the answer to. The kaima, so this is interesting, it's Machlekes Rashi and Tais exactly as we see pictures over here, what exactly is the description, but we're talking about where the store is Bekeren Zavis. It's in a corner. So Rashi brings a picture over here. So for example, if you have a small alleyway that ends into a big alleyway, and the store is by the edge of the small alleyway, right before you enter into the big alleyway, and it's drawn a little bit inward, and when the animal is going from the larger alleyway to the smaller one, where you have everyone at like traffic always when you come to the 4 lanes into the 2 lanes, you see everyone's like merging. So when the animal's merging into the mavoi cotton, it hits those peiros right away, derech hilucha, as it's walking. Whereas Rashi says the main point is it's not machazeres. It's not really turning its head. Some bring actually a picture on the side of the Gemara from Xavier Yomi, that a different picture, which they bring in parentheses, that's actually the picture of Taisis, where you see the small alleyway as you're turning the bend to go into the larger alleyway. There's a store there, like on the corner, and but the main idea is again that you're hitting it, and you're not going turning your head.
But halfway Rashi, because people usually travel on the right hand side. If you're going from a Moe Godel to Moe Cotton, he would have to turn his head if people,
No, I'm saying the animal. It sounds like it's coming from the left. I mean, everyone. This is a whole movie that people are in this big square.
they would exit on the left-hand side, so the doctor wouldn't have to turn his head.
You want to know if they always had the
If he's
traffic
talking
patterns of
about
right
like
and left. You want to?
He would be on the left-hand side.
Maybe they lived in the UK. Saying right.
He wouldn't have to turn his head. Huh? No. People usually travel on the right.
I'm saying, but not in Europe, right?
Oh, come on.
Come on. Either way. Right. You want to know if Rashi, if depends on the right, exactly. Rashi's example would be from the Mabagot to Mabakatan, it seems like, because that's like when you're merging. The other picture would seem to be like from the Mabakatan to the Mabagadol. Yeah. The main idea is this idea that that you're hitting it and you're not necessarily turning your head, and therefore that's why it's going to have this halacha, mishlemes mashanenis, because it's a regular shem b'shasarab. Now, ikadam that those that say a different version, that mechazeres, that actually regarding turning its head, kulam lepliga, no one disagrees the chayebis that you are going to be chayev because the animal should not have been turning its head to the sides of the street. In other words, it's not the normal shein in Rosh Hashanah, and therefore, yes, even Shmuel would agree that you're going to be chayiv. So, klip so what is the case that they disagree about according to the second version? Is bamakze mokim, if someone sets aside an area mirshusai from his private domain, Rosh Hashanah, to the public domain. In other words, many people, their property line really goes further out, but they don't want their house to be, or their property to be right there. So they go within their property line and they build, and they leave from their property for Rosh Hashanah. And he spread out peiros over there. Now, an animal comes over there in its normal way of walking, and it eats it. Oh, that's the machlekes between Rav and Shmuel Bachid. But this is what it says. Rabbi says, Lo yishanu el machzeres. We didn't say that you can be chayiv only if the animal turns its head. Aval mekatze malka mir shusel or shusram. But if you set aside an area from your own domain for a shusram, so betura. So then, actually, the owner of the animal is going to be exempt because, again, that's considered derech hiluchai. Shmuel says no. Even if he set aside area from his own private domain for the Rosh Hashanah, the owner of the animal is going to be chayiv. So says the Gemara, Lema, let us say that this machlekes Rabbi Shmuel is dependent on a different concept, what's called bebar b'shusa k'miflagi. They disagree regarding when a person digs a pit in his own private property, then he's mafker his reshus, but he's not mafker his bar. He says, yeah, I don't need the property anymore, but guys, I need the well. I have to hold on to the well. But the rest of my property, yeah, it's hefker. Whoever wants could use the property. Which a machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva later on, in Perek Shlosh Nogich is a part of Memtesim and Beis. Rav, so the Gemara shows you how these two ideas are dependent on each other. Rav Dama Potter, Rav that says that you're going to be Potter. Remember, you don't confuse whose Potter is Chayiv. You have to help up a little bit. Rav that says that when the shiur is walking in the street, and remember, the guy's property is right there off the side of the street. He was mafkarit because he built within his property line. So everyone's walking now in his property, but it's like part of Rosh Hashanah. Rav that says you Potter because somebody holds Bar B'Shus Chayiv. When you make a pit in your own private property and then you mafker it, that you, the Bala bargain Michayiv, if someone gets injured, when really was in your own private property, but you mafker it, that's why this animal that ate the peiros in that same area type would be chayiv, is because when you spread your peiros over there, that's like a bar. Where if the animal would have slipped on those peiros, the owner of the peiros actually would be chayiv because he was mafke his reshus, which he should not have done that. And the Gemara tells us later on Perek HaManiach, Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, that anything that causes problems in Rosh Hashanah that damages, you have to pay. And actually, whoever will take it could take it because you have no right to do that. These two ideas are interdependent. That since he holds that when you make a bar b'shusa, you're going to be chayiv. So this produce is considered a public hazard because it's like a bar that you made in your own reshus, but you let people go there, you mafker it. So that's actually why the animal's owner could. This is the same reason why if the animal comes and eats it, he's going to be pater because kol hakoydim zacha. A guy puts a makalkal, everyone else is allowed to take that makalkal. So therefore, That's why it's going to be pater. So don't get confused with the words chayiv and pater. Because the owner of the bar is chayiv, that's why the other one who eats up your bar, which are those payers you have there, is going to be pater. Whereas the Shmuel Damar chayiv, according to Shmuel, that says that the bar b'shusay is going to be chayiv. I mean that he says that the animal that eats is going to be chayiv because cover he old bar b'shusay pater. That when you make a bar in your domain, you're pater. So therefore, the animal that goes and eats is going to be chayiv because the owner of the payers had permission to put his payers over there, and it didn't make it a reshus rabbim to that extent to make the owner of the animal pater because it's not derech hilucha because the ma'aser still has reshus. So therefore, that's what the Gemara says. L'chayra machlokes Rabbi Shmuel is dependent on the machlokes tanoim of bar b'shusay. But says the Gemara, no. Each one wants to tell you that I could tell you that I could be like both tanoim. Amar Rav, I would tell you, truth I could tell you is good in Tamid Beis, but Amar that in general, bar b'shusay pater. No, actually, if someone builds a bar in his rishus and then he's mafka the rishus, he's going to be exempt. Because the Torah only makes you liable when you dig a bar in rishus rabbim, as Rabbi Shmuel learns out his reason over there, as we'll see later on. So wait a second, so here it's different, which the Gemara is asking. So why, if that's the case, is the owner of the animal pater for eating the payros? If it's not a bar that you're chayav for, that it's not a makalkal that you could be able to kolakad and zacha, is because the Mazik could say, Lav kol kaminach, you don't have any rights, the makavas lo lepeiros chalurshus rabbim, that you put your produce so close to the public street, and then you're going to make my ox liable. So there's a svar over here, even though it's not mitzad the svar of kolakad and zacha, it's not because it's a mazik bar that you be chayav. No, the guy is pater. If some animal would slip on his pairs, he'd be pater. But you put it so close that you want to be mechayiv now my animal for having eaten it, that you have no right to do, and we have rights to go here in the street, and therefore that's why he's going to be pater. Shmuel Amar, he could tell you the other way too. The Alma, in general, I could tell you actually bar b'shusay chayav. That when someone digs a pit in his rishus and then he's mafkir it, since he was mafkir it, so it's like a bar b'shus ram now, and he's going to be chayiv. So then the question is, so then why over here the animal that eats it is going to be chayiv? It's a bar in b'shus ram, which you chayiv for. And anytime there's a chayiv of a bar, you're allowed to go and take away that guy's mazik, which in this case the payers, and therefore if your animal ate the payers should be pater. So he says no, because pit you could say labadaite, that the ox is unaware to protect itself from the pit, and since he went with permission, because he was mafker his rishus, so you'd say that the balabar is going to be chayiv. But by produce, could you say labadaite that the animal was not aware? Hachaslu. What do you mean? He did see it. He actually ate it. And as Rashi explains, even if the animal would slip on it, that actually the owner of the payers actually would be pater. Every takala is a bar. So that's what Rashi explained. That's only Rishus Ram, where a person doesn't have permission to put over there. But here, the person did in his own Rishus. So even though you're right, at the end of the day, generally by a bar, we would hold that you would be chayiv when you mafkir your Rishus. But that's by bar, because the animal doesn't see this. And it's a hazard. But here, the payers, you do see it. And since you do see it, your animal will be chayiv for having eaten the pears. It's not the same as a regular bar, which you say, no, the owner bar is going to be chayiv, and therefore whoever wants to take away the mazik can take it away. Here, no, you can't. If you ate my pears, you are going to be chayiv. So each Amar could explain that he could even be like the other Tana of this machlokes tanoim. So the Gemara now says, let's say that this halacha of machzeres is tanoi, he's a machlokes tanoim. Why? The Tanya in the Brisa. The animal eats from the street. Okay, so that we know Mishlemes Mashanenis, you pay what your benefit is again, because this is Shem B'Shas Ram, you're pater. Mitzidei Rechava. The animal ate from the sides of the street, which is this Machlekes Rav and Shmuel on how do you qualify the halacha Tzidei Rechava. So the first Tanaim say Mishlemes Mashazika. You have to pay what the damage is, which is really the words of our Mishnah, which said that Mitzidei Rechava, you pay what the damage is. The Rebbe Yehuda. They say these following words, which we're going to try to show and pin it on this Machlekes Amaram. They say, "Ein darka lechel ela lahalach." It's not its norm to eat, but to go. So the Gemara says, "Rabbi Yisrael and Tana Kama." Rabbi Yisrael is saying the same thing as the first Tana, because like Rashi explains, the Gemara
said it was there for behemoth to eat.
this is not the street, the sides of the street. We're talking about now the sides, the tzidirach, the sides of the street.
Wouldn't it be kosher and a place where it's ruggle to go, he's eating, and on the side where it's more quiet?
No, because usually animal stays in the street. Then there's this, it usually stays in the street. The sides of the street, like where by people's entry to their homes, it doesn't usually go over there. So the Gemara assumes right now that Rabbi Yossi is not talking about in the street itself that to say that you're going to be chayiv, because everyone assumes that Obir B'stei Acher tells you that you only chayiv in Rosh Hashanah, not in Rosh Hashanah. So the Gemara assumes when he's saying that it's not normal to eat, only to go, that he's telling you you're going to be chayiv on the sides of the street. That so it's saying that if it eats, it's going to be chayiv when it's going, not when it stands. So, but that's the same thing as the Bava Kama. So what's he saying differently? So the Gemara wants to infer must be the difference between them is regarding turning the head. That even when you turn your head, you're also going to pay only what the benefit was. Meaning, when they say machazeres, when they say tzidei rechava, well, we'll see in a second how Rashi explains this. But when you turn your head, you're only going to pay, like Shmuel said, what the benefit was. Rabbi Yossi says no, like Rav said, when you turn your head, you're going to pay what the damage is. Like Rashi said, he explains, says that what we're telling you, according to Meir, the first Tana, that he says that the sides of the street, that you pay what the damage is, that would be, for example, if the animal went and stood there on the side of the street, like Shmuel said. But if it just turns his head, that not. That's Rabbi Yossi is coming to say, his words are coming to say, no, it's not normal for it to turn its head and to eat, only to go. So if it did turn its head and eat, so therefore you're going to be chayiv, because that's not shein b'shus rab. Whether that means because of mashuna, of keren, or because that's considered chatzah nizik, however you want to say that, but that's what the Gemara is assuming right now, that that's a machlekes regarding mechazeres, that is a machlekes tanoim, because what else are they disagreeing about? Must be it's regarding mechazeres of tzidei rechava. And that's the Gemara loy. No, not necessarily. The kulam, I can tell you that everyone holds mechazeres, it could be like either one of them, but they're not talking about mechazeres. The machlekes actually is in the street itself. Rabbi Yossi is telling you that you can be chayiv for shein b'reshus harabim, and they're disagreeing. How do you translate the words ubir b'stei acher? What does that mean? Mar savar, the Tana Kama held ubir b'stei acher means only be grazed in another field, but b'reshus harabim, not in the street. It has to be in the victim's property. Mar savar, Rabbi Yossi held that no, that actually ubir b'stei acher just means b'reshus hamazik. It means not in the damager's property. Where if, let's say, someone brings his payers into the chutz of the balabais without permission, and then the animal of the balabais eats it, that's what you're going to be patur on. But in the street, which is something we hadn't heard of up until this point, we always assumed everyone holds shem b'shasham as patur. We're introducing to you where Rabbi Yossi holds no, shem b'shasham is actually going to be chayiv. Ubi b'stei acher is just excluding the sad of the mazik. But it doesn't have to be a sad of the nizik. It could even be in the street. And that's what Rabbi Yossi was saying when he said his words that in dark alech ala halach. Yeah, that when it's going in the street, it's normal. It's normal for it to eat, and you're going to be chayiv in the street. Says Gemara b'shus hamazik. What do you mean? That's what you're telling the pasuk of b'stei acher is coming to exclude. But that's a svara. Leima peidcha b'shus in my body. The guy could be able to say, well, your produce in my property. What's it doing over here? Why do we need a pasuk to say that the owner of the animal is going to be patur for shteitzach? Says Gemara, Eli, you're right. That's not the difference between them. Rather, it's the ilfa of Reb Oishia, which they had said previously. We had quoted Ilfa's teaching that said if an animal sticks out its neck and it eats from the back of another animal, he said, yeah, you're going to be chayiv. That's not shem b'shus harabim. Or Reb Oishia's teaching that he said if an animal jumps and it eats from a box, is he chayiv? That's ikabanai. That's the difference between these two tanoim, as Rashi explains. Your Meir holds that when you're eating from the street, you're always going to be patur. It's in the street. It's just going to pay according to Mashanen, according to what pleasure it had. And even in the case of Ilfa and Reb Oishia, that it's, let's say, eating from the back of another animal, you're still going to be patur, because the mice of the animals in Rosh Hashanah. I don't care that it's the back of an animal, which that's like the chatzah nizik. That's not. And that Rabbi Yossi is coming to say, his words are, ein darka, when he says his words, ein darka lechel el halach, He means it's not the norm for the animal to stick out its neck on the other animal, and it's not normal for to jump from the road and to eat. Rather, el halach, only to go. What he's essentially telling you is, therefore, that he holds up ill for everybody. He's just teaching that it's not going to be considered as reshus ram, which is orche. It's going to be considered as the reshus of the nizik, and therefore you can be chayiv. Which Taisus explains says it's not from the same idea. Rabbi is talking about when an animal jumps, and therefore you're chayiv because it's karen. If we're talking about when it's on the back of another animal, which would be considered shein b'shus hanizik. But either way, that's going to be a case when he's going to say it's not the norm. It's only normal for it lahalach, and therefore these which are not the norm is going to be chayiv. Unlike the Tanna Kamma held, no, the animals are shusab, and therefore it's going to be pater. Now look at the next Mishnah. Continuing on this mazik of shein and regel, says the Mishnah hakelav agadi, a dog and a goat, shekavtze meresh agag, that jump from the top of a roof, and it lands and v'shavres hakelim, and his neighbor's toy is there, and it breaks his shovel. So Misham Nezik Shalom, the owner of the dog, has to pay for full damages. Why? Because they are considered mu'id. It's normal for them to jump, which, as Rashi points out, this must be talking about that he jumped into his neighbor's property, because this is talada of regel, and regel is only b'shus hanizik. So the dog jumped off. He thought he was doing a stunt. The dog jumps off your porch into the neighbor's property right next door, the next co-op, and he smashes his brand new shovel, and so you have to pay full damages. Where did we say that?
Because the Bahami is not supposed to jump.
It's a land
When
that
an animal takes pairs from the other animals.
Oh, you're talking about in Rishus Rabim when they jump.
Over here, that's the standard.
Yeah, meaning in other words, it's not urche. That was considered like something abnormal for it to do. And that's actually the Gemara is going to discuss now also different types of jumping. But jumping from a roof seems like it's normal for the animal to do, to jump down.
Not for any animal.
Yeah, and we'll see in a second exactly. Right, not the par. So you have to know your place. So then the Mishnah continues, Hakelev shenat l'chadara. If a dog, this case that we speak about many times, the dog takes the biscuit, the hot biscuit, and he went to a pile of grain. So maybe animals also hide when they take stuff. So he went to the neighbor's pile of grain, and what happened was, he ate the hot biscuit, and the whole pile of grain went up in smoke. So for the biscuit, which he stole also from a neighbor, he has to pay the full damages, because that's shein b'shus hanizik. And on the pile of grain, he pays only half the damage, which the Gemara is going to explain exactly why that is. But the Gemara first makes an inference. Time of the kavtzer. Okay, it sounds like that the reason why the owner of the dog has to pay for breaking his neighbor's tractor that his dog fell on, because the animal jumped. Hanafli, sounds like if the animal fell, partly it'd be exempt. Which the animal falls, that's an oinus. So what does that mean? Says the Gemara, Almak Sabas, obviously we see the time of our Mishnah holds Tchilas b'pshia. If the beginning of a person was a negligence, where he should have entertained that if he has his dog on the roof, his dog might jump, because it's normal for them to jump. And v'seifa ba'inus, the end, if let's say something that you would not have expected, because falling is not something that you usually think of an animal. Animals are usually very cautious, and they usually know they have good proprioception, and they know where they are and how to be able to jump. So pater, we see that yes, you would be exempt even though it's chilas b'shir, and that's why the Mishnah says you only chayv when they jump, because if it fell, then you'd be pater, even though the chilah is b'shir by having it there on the roof. Similar in the Brisa, the dog and the goat that jumped from the top of the roof, they broke the neighbor's vessels. You have to pay full damages. Naflu, if the animal fell, that Peturin, then you would be exempt. Says the wait a second. That's only good according to the one who holds which later on Pekam Afkid, meaning in Bava Kama Daf. Is party. You're right. Even though you're initially negligent, the end of the you're going to be potter. According to the one who holds that you chayv in such a case, Michael, what are you going to say for him? That this contradicts him. Says the Gemara, no. Kagain, we're talking about where the Makarvi Kalim Magabi Kaisel. Interesting case. The neighbor stuff, you lived in a tenement or whatever, one of these places where the guy's wall, a little space between your house and his property. And his vessels were right up against your wall. Chikavtzi b'kvitza, where if the animal would jump, lo nafle alayu, he would not have fell on this guy's shovel. So there's not even initial negligence, because had it jumped, it would have jumped beyond where the vessel is. When it fell off the wall and broke his vessel, that was always an oinus. So even though there's tchilas b'pshia, so to speak, of being on the roof, but not for these vessels, and therefore it's not going to be considered tchilas b'pshia b'sei b'oinus, because yes, you would be chayiv. Here the Bryce says you can be pater because it's not even the tchilas b'pshia. Now Amar Rav Shloimy Schwartzberg says, sometimes shafila nafli na mechayiv, that actually even when the animal falls, you would be chayiv. Like Rashi points out, even according to one that holds tchilas b'pshia b'sei b'oinus is pater, which okay, even if you initially negligent, and still if it falls, which is the oinus, you're pater. No, times when you fall, you could be chayiv. How's that? You could have it by a shaky wall, where the wall of the roof is shaky, that even regarding falling, it is a negligence. Which the Gemara says, my niu. What is that? The boila lesuki daita, you're trying to say that he should have entertained the nafal archi, that the bricks would fall down? Well, so nafal archi. But at the end of the day, the bricks did not fall down. Nafal inhu. And the animal fell. So tchilas b'pshia, at the end of the day, it's still only initial negligence regarding the bricks, but it's sefer ba'inisu. But it's at the end of oinus that the animal itself fell. So it's not sefer b'pshia. So according to the one that holds tchilas b'pshia sefer ba'inus b'hater, so why are you saying if the animal falls that you're going to be chayiv? So the Gemara says, "Lo tzricha." You're right. No, it's not talking about a weak wall on the roof. Rather, we're talking about b'kaisel tsar. We're talking about a very narrow wall. When you put them on top of the roof, you should have entertained that it's going to jump in its normal way, and from this mica, which is narrow, it's going to fall down from. So either or it's like Rashi says, maybe it's slanted, but either way, a very narrow wall, which is a pshia, even regarding the falling of the animal, because it's normal for it to jump up onto the wall, and since it's very narrow, the animal is likely to fall. So therefore, that was always considered as a pshia. So qualifying this halacha, so akelav agdisha dolgun, the dog and the kid goat that jump. So mimata lamala pturin. If it jumps from the ground above, higher up, it's going to be pater from nezik shalom. It's going to be chayv chazi nezik, like Rashi says, because it's mashuna. It's actually abnormal for them to jump upwards. But mimala mata chayavin, to jump from the roof, to jump from higher up down, that the owner of the dog and the goat are going to be chayv. So you see those animals, they jump downwards, they're able to like brace themselves, but to jump upwards, that's not normal. Now, a person and a chicken that jump, whether from top down or down up, like Rashi explains, a person, even if it's not normal for him to jump from bottom up, he's going to be chayiv because a person never has an element of tam, only by an animal. And the chicken is normal for it to jump even from bottom up, and so too from top down, which Taisa asks, what's the chiddush by Adam that you chayiv? Adam is always chayiv. So he gives an interesting example regarding if someone he's watching his friend's house and the chesed b'katan. But al kapanim, the Gemara ends over the question as it continues about of chavbezim and al v'tan. We'll learn the brisa hakelav agadisha dolgu regarding the dog and the goat that jump. Beimil mala mata, beimil mata lamala, whether from the top down or down up. Turn, we see that you're going to be pater. So how can you say they're going to be chayiv? So take me out papa. Papa actually translates to apach mepach. No, it's actually opposites, meaning kalba bezkira, the dog by jumping, the gadi besricha, and the goat when it sticks its nails into the wall, which it's not normal and it's mashuna. So the Gemara says, then why are they exempt? So the Gemara paturim in nezer shalom, it just means they're exempt from nezer shalom, chayiv mechatzi nezik, and then mechayiv in chatzi nezik. I can get to any type of those things.